So anyway, Bob's probably, this is the third or fourth time you've done, third time. Everybody's always enjoyed it. He goes to Africa about twice a year.
We try, yes.
Yeah, tries to go twice a year because he is an avid photographer and he has several photography awards. So besides being a longtime OLLI member and head of Current Issues, which has nothing formally to do with this, so we're very, very lucky to have him. And with these wonderful slides, everybody's in for a really good treat. So I'll turn it over to Bob.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Before I jump in, how many of you have been to Africa before? How many have been more than once? Okay, well, I need a 12-step program. My wife and I have been 18 times. No. Most of our travel has been to East Africa. We've also been to Southern Africa a little bit, but most of it has been to East Africa. So let me give you a sense of kind of what we got coming up here, if I can see what I'm doing. Oh, by the way, please silence your phones if you haven't done so already. Oh, I am going to make obviously a presentation, but if you have comments or thoughts or anything, hold your hand up. We do have some people on Zoom, I guess. Maybe?
Yeah, we have six people on Zoom.
We have 6 on Zoom. So in order to be taking care of them, Alona will bring the mic to you. Please wait for her to come, okay? But if you have comments, certainly feel free to jump in. Let me give you a sense of the agenda. Okay, the first hour we'll be just kind of talking about Africa in general. Talk about safety because that's something who people sometimes ask about or often ask about. But most of the time we'll be talking about the wonderful animals, okay, which is why a lot of us go. And then at the end of that hour, we'll have a brief discussion about conservation. We'll take a break, and then you can go across to the bathrooms if you want, as you heard. Second hour, we'll kind of drill down into actually going and some of the mechanics and so forth. I'll talk about the most common countries that people go to for safari. What is safari like? What's a day in safari? Talk about lodges, camps, and give you some idea of the costs involved. Tours versus going on your own privately. Some of the other things that you can do aside from just going on game drives to see the animals. And then some tips. And I've left some time for people to ask questions or to contribute their own experiences, whatever it is that you want to do. Okay? So jumping in. When people say they're going to Africa, you need to drill down a little bit. Africa is a continent. Okay, it goes all the way from Egypt and Algeria all the way down to South Africa. There are 54 countries. There's 1.3 billion people and loads of different cultures. So if someone says they're going to Africa, it needs a little bit more specificity. Safari locations are the ones over here, the most common ones. Now, a lot of the other countries do have some animals, but they're not really safari locations that people would think about. So these are the common ones. Kenya and Tanzania are very popular. That's East Africa. Uganda and Rwanda are also a location where they're known for the gorilla treks. And then everything from there down is called South or Southern Africa, basically from Zambia all the way down to South Africa. Okay, so generically you've got East Africa and Southern Africa. Let me talk about safety. Safaris really are very safe. You know, there have been a few incidents where an animal acted up and there were some issues, but it's extraordinarily rare. And just as an aside, we went to Kenya during COVID. It was terrific. It was wonderful being in the bush instead of being in the city. So, I mean, it's a very safe activity. If you're going, however you're going there, you're going to places that are intended to be for tourists. They're designed to take care of you. You're not going to have any issues. Safari areas, obviously you're going to see the animals many times, most of the time. And there are some dangerous animals, without question. But you also may see young kids walking through the parks on their way to school. Seems strange to us. Wait a minute, I'm huddled here in the car and they're walking, they're 10 years old walking across the ground when there's lions around or whatever. Well, they've grown up with it. They understand how to live in that environment, just like if you're from New York, you learn how to live there. Okay? Different problems, but you learn how to be safe. Okay? You need to listen to your guides and staff, and whenever you go to a camp or to a lodge, they'll give you a briefing, a safety briefing, and they'll say what the do's and don'ts are. And as long as you listen to them, you'll be fine. You see all these videos online about the Turons of Yellowstone or whatever, where people do incredibly stupid things and get hurt because of that. When you're on safari, their job, the people's job there is to keep you safe. So it's really not a problem. Kind of the last issue might be health related. And just check with the CDC website and the destination country for any recommended shots or anything that you might need. Okay, because they do have different diseases there that we don't have generally. But it's, again, not a problem. So safety is really not a concern. They are, many of them, third world countries. But just like with any place that you go, there are good areas and bad areas. If you go to New York, there's wonderful places to go and there's horrible places to go. You go to Los Angeles, the same thing. Same thing applies here. There are areas in the cities that might be problematic. You're in the countryside almost all the time. It's really not a concern. Okay, let's talk about the animals. And I started out at the top with the big cats, which everybody loves. And that's lions, leopards, and cheetahs. Lions are cats. They sleep 20 hours a day. Okay, if you have cats at home, you know that that's pretty common. These are bigger, that's all. And I think she's probably pregnant, just looking at her. Either that or she had one hell of a meal. But most of the time, by the way, you'll see lions lying on the ground. You won't see them up in the trees, although sometimes you do. So this was just an interesting picture that I threw in there for that. You will see them out and about. They won't always be just lying there. And when we get into the details of what a day on safari is like, I'll explain why. Lions live in prides. That's what they call a group of lions, which can be anywhere from a handful up to 30. And, most of the adults are females. There's maybe a few males there, but most of the adults are females. And the females do everything. Okay? They take care of the young. They do the hunting. And they do that in a very coordinated fashion. By the way, how many of you watch like nature shows on TV or something? Okay, so you've probably seen some of the stuff I'm going to be talking about. The females share the care for their cubs. So it's a really supportive society. So if mom's out hunting, one of the other females might even nurse the baby. Okay, so they take care of each other. The males don't do a lot, okay, but they're super strong. And so they have two jobs. One is to make the cubs. The second is to protect the pride. And there's typically one or two that are the dominant males. And they are defending the pride from other male lions because they want the right to mate with the females. And so they're fighting off their competitors, if you will. These can be vicious fights where they kill each other. And, not always, but that's certainly a potential. And kind of commonly, the males last maybe 5 or 6 years in that role before they just get too old and too tired. At which point, the next chapter starts, the new ones come in, and unfortunately, one of the first things they do is they kill all the cubs, okay, because they want their own progeny there. Okay, so needless to say, the females want a strong male as the dominant male to protect the cubs. The way nature works, though, is they want the strongest gene pool, and that's how that continues. Okay. The male lions, I think, are better looking. Okay. You know, they have the manes. When you see a lion with a mane, that's a male. And they're all different varieties of these, different colors and whatever, but that's what they kind of look like. The cubs are cuter than hell. And that applies across the board to all of these animals. It's very typical with any of the predators that the cubs roughhouse. I mean, they're constantly, you know, they're biting mom's tail. They're climbing all over them. They're chasing each other. They're doing all kinds of crazy things, which is really a kick to watch. It's a lot of fun. It's got to be tiring if you're the mother, but basically they're really, really cute. And on the lower one here, as I said, the females do most of the hunting. Once in a while, the male will help if they've got very large prey, like an elephant or a Cape buffalo or something. This was a time when he got recruited to help. And as I said, they're not very good at it. P.S. He jumped the gun. The prey went away. That was the end of that. Okay. Quick story, and I'll interchange some stories from our trips. We had what we call our Nat Geo sighting where, you okay? There's water if you need it. Okay. Anyway, we had I know I got you started. That's even worse. I'm sorry. Anyway, we came on a group of lionesses that were eating a warthog. And when lions make a kill, all the other scavengers are around. So you had all kinds of other animals that were trying to get a piece of the action. So it's always fun to watch. And there was a herd of Cape buffalo, which are very strong, you know, animals. They're basically like a buffalo here, or a bison kind of thing. The lions preyed on that herd, and so there was no love lost between them at all. But the Cape buffalo were very cautious because the lions would kill them. And so we watched as they kind of gradually came in closer and closer, building up their strength to get there because they wanted to get rid of the lionesses. And I mean, finally one of them got so close that one of the lionesses just slapped at her, you know, with her claws and clawed her face. And so all of this is going on, and we're watching all of this unfold. All of a sudden, everybody scattered. I mean, it just like a light switch went off. Everybody left. In trotted a male. He just kind of walked in, grabbed what was left of the food, and walked away. And that was that. Okay. So lions get a lot of respect. I mean, the males. Let's talk about leopards. These are sort of the opposite in lifestyle. Okay. Leopards are solitary, as are cheetahs, by the way. And it's very unusual to see more than one leopard at a time, if you see them at all, because they're very elusive. The only time you'll see more than one is if they're going about mating or close to mating, or if she has a cub. And so other than that, you generally will just see them by themselves. They're really hard to find. There are exceptions to everything that I'm going to say, but generally they're hard to find. And when we go on safari, we might be there for 10 days or 2 weeks, and typically we'll see one or two. The way that the guides find them most of the time, they spend most of their time up in trees. The way the guides find them is they see the tail hanging down. Okay? It's the only way that they can find them. So it's a challenge to find them, but they're worth seeing, obviously. As I say, there are exceptions to that, but they are just spectacularly beautiful animals. They're very strong, but they live solitary, so they don't have help in the hunt, just like the lions do. And so when they're hunting, they have to be sneaky. Okay, so they'll creep in, get as close as they can, and then jump on their prey. Sometimes they'll even jump from a tree down onto their prey, okay, as opposed to the lions, which generally are chasing. And as I say, they're stealth hunters. Now, as I said, there are exceptions, okay? The beautiful one over on that side. 3 years ago, we had our then 11-year-old grandson with us on safari, and we had told him that it was hard to see leopards. And because he was with us, our luck was better. We came around a turn and there was this young leopardess sitting on the rocks out in the open, which you don't usually see. And his comment was, when we first saw her, "Oh my God, so beautiful." Okay. And she really is. So that was a wonderful sighting. So one of the theme that comes back over and over is you never know what you're going to see. Okay. This is a cub. Okay. Up in a tree as it happened, which is where you usually find them. And by the way, all of the predators don't like the other predators. That's their competitors. And so the cubs are in danger of being killed by lions or hyenas, whatever. And that kind of goes all directions, with the exception of the cheetahs, who don't kill the other cats. But it's an ongoing thing. So most of the time, the cubs are up in the trees with mom or by themselves. And this lady down here is a star in the wildlife community. She's what's called a melanistic leopard. So genetically, she's black instead of the usual patterns. She just had some cubs and they're the normal colors. Okay. Her name is Giza. She's in northern Kenya, and all of the photographers want to go there and see her. So we were lucky enough to see her. Cheetahs. Most popular cat, everybody's favorite. Okay. They are the weakest of the big cats. And I think everybody knows they're the fastest. Okay. But because they're weaker, their life is much more challenging with some of the other species. And at best, their hunting success is about half. They go chase an animal about half the times they'll catch it, the other half they don't. A lot of times, though, once they've caught an animal or a prey animal for food, some other predator comes and takes it away. So hyenas, lions will steal their prey pretty commonly. So it's really difficult for them. They live solitary lives. The exception is, again, if they're mating, or if they have a cub with them. When the cubs reach about 1 or 2, mom kicks them out, and then they're on their own. Sometimes what happens is the males form groups that they call coalitions, and they might have 3 or 4. There was a famous group of 5 in Kenya recently that's gradually broken apart, but they go together because it's easier to catch food that way. One of the things I mentioned, cheetahs have a really difficult life. One of the challenges is because they're weaker and because it's more challenging to get food in part, they might have 3 to 6 cubs, but only one will survive. So it's tough. It's tough being a cheetah mother. When they're young, the one over on the far side, they have that kind of fuzz on the top. I mean, people have different opinions on what that is. Some say it's camouflage. Some say it's to make it look like a honey badger, which is a really tough animal. But anyway, when they're very young, they have that fur, extra fur there. As I said, all of the prey animals, or the predator animals, when they're young, they're crazy. Okay? I mean, they just go wild. I mean, they chase each other, they jump on each other, they just go nuts, which is a lot of fun to watch. And they're cats, so they clean themselves with their tongue, the usual deal. Let me touch on some other predators. Hyenas, okay? Not everybody's favorite, but frankly, for the wrong reasons, okay? I mean, we like them, okay? Hyenas, people think, are scavengers, and they do scavenge. They will take whatever they can, but they're also excellent hunters, and they hunt in groups. So it's very common for them to take their own prey and do it on their own. They live in groups that are called clans. And by the way, all of the different animals, they have a different name for the groups. I don't know who makes the names up, but it makes you crazy, okay? So these are clans, and they can be anywhere from half a dozen or so up to 100. So typically smaller numbers, but it can be really large. And they have a very good a strong social structure. There's an alpha female who basically is the head of the whole group. She gets to feed, she gets to do everything. Her progeny are the princes or princesses. I mean, it's very structured kind of a group. Like a lot of them, they have really cute cubs. Okay. So over there were the little ones. When they're first born, when they're really young, they're that dark color, the gray, and then they gradually turn into the brown. And these are what are called spotted hyenas. There's also striped, but the most common with the spotted. When you're on safari, it's not common that you see an actual kill, but most likely you will see the aftermath. And so this is nature at work. You know, the animals need to feed. They need to have food. So it's common to see something like this. Down here, actually, there was a lion kill not too far from our camp where a zebra was taken. And what happens when there's a lion kill, as I mentioned before, is all the other animals are hanging around trying to get a piece of the action. Well, this guy ran in, grabbed a leg, and took off with it. And then all of his friends went after him, said, we want it too. Okay. And then the one on top was a different situation with a wildebeest. Jackals. Jackals are basically little dogs. And they mate for life. So it's pretty typical you'll see two of them together, the male and female. And they care for the young together as well. And while they can kill small prey, like a rabbit or something, most of the time they scavenge from a lion or cheetah kill. And this is what that looks like. You can see the cheetah's really bothered. So what happened after this? And by the way, that was so loud it hurt your ears. It was unbelievable. But anyway, the cheetah left some of the food at the end, went away. Jackal came, grabbed it, and of course took it back to his family. Oops, we don't want to do that again. Shut up. Okay. The young ones, as I said, they roughhouse all the time. They chase each other. You know, they do all that stuff, which is really part of learning to hunt. And the other picture is mom feeding a young pup. They regurgitate the food into their mouth. That's why that's going on. And then kind of a unique group, which is called a wild dog or painted dog. Now, these are mostly in southern Africa. We've seen them elsewhere, but most commonly they're in southern Africa. They live in packs that can be 20, 30, 40 at a time. Very structured. Again, an alpha female, the whole structure just like I described before. And they are the most successful hunters. They typically get their prey probably 80 or 90% of the time when they chase something. And they're just beautiful animals. So, any comments or questions at this stage? Okay, so let's go on to other animals. Elephants. You have 3 different generations here together. Most of this you probably know. Elephants live in herds led by a matriarch. They live as much as 80 years old. And the matriarch's primary role is to remember where the food and water are. And so she leads the herd to food and water every day, sometimes as much as 20 or 30 miles away. So it's really important that they be capable. They're very intelligent animals, and they're quite emotional. I mean, they very commonly, if one of their herd dies, they'll stay for several days around the herd, around the dead animal, and grieve. So very, very intelligent animals. There's been stories. There was a case where a man, I think it was in South Africa, had taken care of a sick elephant, had helped it. It was hurt in some animal accident or something. He had taken care of it, and it, of course, went away. And then when its calf had a problem, brought the calf back to the man so that he would take care of it. And then later on, I mean, the herd went away. Some years later, the man died. Somehow the herd found out about it they came back and stayed as if you were part of the herd. So it's really quite amazing. One other interesting thing is there's lots of them, but anyway, one other point was when you're in your safari vehicle and a herd of elephants walks by, it's almost silent. It's really stunning that these huge animals can walk by and you not hear them at all almost. Okay, it's really something. Pretty common to see them throwing dust or dirt over themselves because they're trying to get rid of the flies. And it's very common that they'll do that. And the other picture here, the young one, is, the elephants use their trunks to feed themselves. And the trunks have 10,000 muscles. Now, I haven't counted them. I was told that, okay? But they have 10,000 muscles, which gives them tremendous flexibility. And what they commonly do is they take their nose, let's just call it, reach down, wrap around a long bit of grass or something and feed themselves. Well, this little one couldn't do that. He couldn't figure out how to make his trunk work. So he just bent down and said, "The heck with it, I'm going to eat." Okay. Primates. There are lots of primate species in Africa. Pretty common are baboon, vervet monkeys, chimpanzees, and then the mountain gorillas in Rwanda and Uganda. Baboons live in troops. That's another name for a group. And the troops can be up to several hundred. So it's a big deal when you've got several hundred animals together. It's really interesting. We had one incident in Tanzania where we basically had to wait for like an hour because they were all over the road. And you've got all the babies running around and hanging on to mom and their belly or on their back and chasing each other and all of this chaos going on, which is just incredibly fun to watch. But you have to wait, okay? It's okay. You don't mind. Baboons are prey species for the leopards, and the males are so strong they can actually kill a leopard. So it's mutual destruction there. But other than that, most of them are very peaceful. Those of you who've been to Africa, have you had an experience with vervet monkeys? No? Okay. Vervet monkeys are little thieves. We've had a number of situations where if you're not careful, they steal from you. And we've eaten outside and all of a sudden out of no place, they jump on the table, grab the food and run away. Okay? We had a situation when we were in South Africa where they told us, make sure when you go out of the room that you lock everything, that it's all closed up. And I forgot to lock the window. They came and stole everything. Okay. So they're little thieves and they're smart. They're very intelligent animals. Okay. In fact, when you're staying in a camp with tents, they all have a big zipper in the front. And in some of the camps, you actually have to put a padlock on them because they know how to open the zipper. So they're entertaining. They're fun to watch. And again, beautiful mother and child. I mean, they're just really, really neat to watch. Have any of you been on a gorilla trek? Okay, let me describe kind of how that works. By the way, it's an amazing thing to do. It truly is a life-changing experience. The way it works is all of the tourists gather in one place, whether you're in Rwanda or Uganda. They both work the same way. And they sort you out by how strong they think you might be. Because the way to get to the animals is you have to hike up into the mountains. And so we were fortunate. We were with the old folks, and I wonder why. And we only had to hike about an hour or two to get to the gorillas. And then you get an hour with them where you're just watching them and it's incredibly peaceful and everything, except for the young ones. Young ones, again, are crazy. They're swinging, they're hanging, they're running around, they're chasing each other. It's just pretty wild. It's fun to watch. One incident we had was I was taking a picture this way and one of the young ones came up behind me, slapped me in the butt, said, "Get out of my way, I'm going that way," okay? So you're supposed to stay, remote about 20 or 30 feet away. He didn't care. Okay. He wasn't listening to the rules. He just wanted to go. And by the way, you're supposed to be quiet. I wasn't quiet when he hit me. So So it's an expensive deal to go to the mountain gorillas. It's been, I don't know how many years, but a bit of time since we did it. At that time in Rwanda, it was $1,500 per day, which is for a 1-hour visit with the gorillas. In Uganda, it was about $750. I don't know what the prices are today, but it's somewhere in that range. But what's happening is that money is being used to fund conservation efforts. And it's been a real success. I'll talk about conservation later, but about 20 years ago, there were less than 200 mountain gorillas left. Now there's over 1,000. So it's been a tremendous success. And basically what happens is the money that we bring as tourists is used to provide veterinary care, to provide for rangers to protect them. It gives jobs to the local people, and it adds value in their view. They want to keep those gorillas healthy because that's why all the money comes in. So it's been a great success story. Oh, by the way, a friend of mine went to Uganda, and for whatever reason, he was sorted into, the young stud group. He had to hike for like 8 hours up into the mountain, and it was raining, so it's a rainforest, so it was mud all the way. He just had a really difficult time getting there. Spent his hour, really enjoyed the hour that he spent with them, came back down through the mud. And when he arrived at his lodge, which was at the base of the mountain, there was a family of gorillas on the grass. I will spare you the words he used. Okay. Giraffes. Okay. Giraffes are in groups called towers. And they are the tallest animals, and they graze on trees and things that are higher than other animals. And they also act as kind of the lookout. So it's very common that you see them together with antelopes and other species because they're looking out for the predators. They can see them when the shorter animals can't. These towers can be just a few animals, or it can be as many as 50. And seeing a group of 50 going across the plains is truly amazing. It's just spectacular to see that. Factually, there are 4 different species of giraffe. Basically, it's just a different pattern. They're all similar otherwise. They're great mothers. Okay. That's the one over on the side. One thing that happens is, mom's pretty tall. So when the baby's born, it falls 6 feet to the ground. Okay. But to some degree, that's helpful because with all of these species, they got to get up and get going because otherwise they're in danger. And so you'll see mom prompting them, come on, let's go, let's go, let's go. I mean, I don't know what the words are they're using, but anyway, pushing them to get up and get going. And it's fun to watch because they're real rickety. They can barely stand and, they gradually make their way, but they get up and get going. Zebras. Okay, there are 3 kinds of zebra. The most common one is the plain zebra. Then there's the mountain and Grevy zebras. And for the Great Migration, which I think most of you have heard of, which is about 1.5 million animals, about a third of them are plain zebras. Most of the rest are the wildebeest, and I'll talk about that in a bit. So the one on the far side is what's called a Grevy's zebra. These are highly endangered. There's only about 3,000 left. And they're only found in one area in northern Kenya. But to my view, they're the most beautiful animal. They're really gorgeous. Up here, one of our camps had a water hole that they had put in. And this is a dazzle of zebras. That's what they call those. Down here, that's a female saying to the male, I don't want anything to do with you. Okay? So, they let their thoughts be known. And now antelopes, and kind of a catch-all here. There are all kinds of different antelopes or similar species. There are gazelles, wildebeest, dik-dik, and Cape buffalo in East Africa. In Southern Africa, there are a number of some of those are there, plus some others, which are called duiker, eland, kudu, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of different kinds of what we might generically call antelopes. The one on the far side is called a dik-dik. They're little tiny things about the size of a cat, house cat. And you very commonly see two at a time because they mate for life. Really cute, really fun to see. Up there is a wildebeest with her baby. And then down below are impala. So loads of different varieties. A little bit hard. When first time, it's pretty hard to keep track of which is which. But your guides will always tell you, oh, that's a so-and-so, whatever it is. And then kind of the last thing I want to touch on is birds. Even if you're not interested in birds, even if you're not a birder or anything, there are some spectacular birds in Africa. And there are going to be times when you're on safari when not a lot's going on. Okay? Look at the birds. They're wonderful. And again, your guides know the various birds, and they're big ones, small ones, all different behaviors, all different colors. I didn't want to spend a lot of time on it because I know a lot of you aren't into birds, but it's a great thing to be aware of. Okay, kind of getting closer to the end of our, well, almost the end of our first hour. I want to touch on conservation because it really is an important topic. Here's just some of the things that are going on. Lions, 50% gone in the last 25 years. It's about 25,000 left. Excuse me. Cheetahs, 50% gone in about 30 years. There's only 7,000 left. And I'll touch on that in a minute, but we have some particular issues with cheetahs that we don't have with some of the other species. Leopards, because they're so elusive and hard to see, we don't really know. The assumption is that they're decreasing like many of the others, but we don't know that. And elephants, 60% are gone in the last 10 years, down to about 400,000. So what's going on? One of the big things is habitat loss. Just like here, just like in Europe, just like in South America, whatever, people have taken a lot of the ground over. You know, we used to have millions of bison here. Now we have, I think, 1,500. And it's only because people cared and they tried to reintroduce them. As human population spreads out, it takes away the land from the animals. Poaching is something that you've probably heard of, particularly with rhinos and elephants for their horn or their tusk, and an animal called a pangolin, which I've never seen. It looks like an armadillo, I'm told, and has scales. And so basically the horns, tusks, or scales allegedly have medicinal value for Oriental medicine. And as China and Vietnam in particular have prospered, the market's grown. It puts more pressure on the animals. And poaching, while the individual who's actually doing the poaching, maybe just a local person who's poor and needs to get some money, is controlled by cartels, just like the drug cartels. They're very sophisticated, very wealthy, and it's a real challenge. So the result of all that money sloshing around is a lot of corruption. You know, when someone finally gets caught, which does happen, you know, they may just bribe their way out of whatever's going on. So it's a real challenge. But more and more attention is being paid to all of these issues, I should tell you. We'll touch on that later. Before I go too far there, with cheetahs, we have all of these issues, plus the ones I mentioned, which is how difficult it is for them to raise their young. Plus, we're loving them to death. Cheetahs are popular. So in the busy national parks, if there is a cheetah sighting, you might have 30 cars around it, which is really stressful for the animal. Basically means they can't see prey. They don't know if a predator's coming. It's just really, really stressful for the cheetahs. So that's one big issue. The second issue is that for centuries, cheetahs have been pets. I mean, in the French Loire Valley, they had cheetahs as pets. And today in Somalia, they have a trade in cheetah cubs, mostly being sold into the Middle East. And that's not a good sign for them. I mean, it doesn't help. Okay. So cheetahs in particular have all of these other issues plus that. Climate. In the maybe 15 years we've been going to Africa, we've seen change. And basically the climate is less predictable than it was. And particularly for the grazing animals, they need food. If they're surrounded by people in this park and the weather changes now and the good grass is outside of that area, it makes it really difficult for them. So the climate is affecting these animals, some more than others, obviously. And kind of the last major issue is poverty and the human-animal interaction. You know, imagine that you're a subsistence farmer. You've got to have your crop or you're going to die. And then a herd of elephants comes through and takes it. What ends up happening is some of the elephants get killed. Or if you're raising cattle and cats come in and take some of your cattle, you're going to want to kill them. So it's a real challenge for both sides. It's a real problem. And most of the major conservation efforts that I'll talk about next involve both the people and the animals. Because if you don't take care of both, it's just not going to work as well. So there's lots of conservation efforts. The major charities, there's a bunch of them out there. And the big zoos fund both local and international efforts. We were at one camp. I guess I should tell the whole story about Sylvester. There was a little segue, but it ties in. There was a camp near Victoria Falls where they had a small nonprofit affiliated with it with a couple of veterinarians that were taking care of the local animals. And they had a cheetah that they had hand raised. And the situation was that when the cheetah was 2 days old, his mother was killed. A ranger named Sylvester found him, brought him to the veterinarians. He got named Sylvester, and they hand raised him from then on. They slept with him, took care of him, and every day they'd bring him over to the camp, and we could pet him, we could sit with him, we could walk with him. And one of the things, I don't have the picture here, but one of the things that we talk about all the time is my wife was sitting at the edge of a deck. Cheetah, Sylvester, was sitting next to her, and she's petting him, he's purring. All of a sudden, he lied down on her lap, okay? Which, I mean, she was in heaven from then on, okay? So I have that picture. It's about this big at home on the wall, and we talk about it all the time, okay? So these little nonprofits, by the way, and the tie-in here is when we visited that nonprofit, they found out we were from California, said, "Oh, have you heard of San Diego Zoo?" And we said, "Oh yeah, we're members there." And they went, "Oh my gosh, really?" Well, they were funded by San Diego Zoo Global. So it was a big deal to them. For us, it was nothing. For them, it was a big deal. So there are lots of these, I don't know lots, but there are a number of these local nonprofits, like the one I described. There are cheetah rescues, elephant rescues, other animal-related entities. The governments in these countries want tourism. And they know if there's problems, they're not going to have tourism. And so they try, through anti-poaching efforts, they have rangers, they have other activities that they use to try and take care of this. And there's an international law called CITES, which is supposed to limit the trade in endangered species. And I guess it helps, but certainly not a cure-all. So there's lots of conservation efforts. I think as more and more TV shows come up, and as more exposure to these wonderful animals and things comes out, there's more and more attention being paid to that, and hopefully it'll keep things going. So there's been a kind of a theme here, which is you never know what you're going to see. I'm sorry, I stepped ahead. One of the other things that does help the situation is ecotourism. When we go there, we bring money. That provides jobs, it gives education to the people, and it makes them value the animals because that's what brings us there. It also funds, depending on the camps or whatever, it may fund anti-poaching efforts. But as I mentioned earlier, over-tourism is a problem when we're crowded around an animal or something like that. But as I said, on safari, you never know what you're going to see. Okay? So even though the guides know what's out there and they communicate with each other and they say, okay, well, we think there's a lion group or whatever here, you never know what's going to happen. So let's take a break. I'm just about on time. We have about 10 minutes. So the second half is about going to Africa. Okay? Going on safari. Downside is it's darn far away. Okay? It takes you 2 days to get there however you go. And it's a long ways there. It's the other side of the world. I mean, almost literally, it's the other side of the world. The flights take 2 days each way, plus any long layovers that you choose to have. Most of the time, depending on where you're going and timing and everything, you'll be flying either through Europe or through the Middle East. There are some flights that go, depending on where you're going, there are a few flights that go from the United States to Africa, but the vast majority of them are either Europe or the Middle East. And some people will do a layover in the middle someplace, spend a few days in England or whatever it might be, and then fly down. We generally go straight through. So we'll have a couple hours on the ground and then off to the next flight. We usually go for somewhere between 10 and 14 days in the bush, and we'll take one night near the airport that we arrive in and basically recover from the trip, from the flights, and then we go on to the camps. And most of the time on our trips, we visit 3 different camps. Because it's so darn far away, unless you're tying it in with something else, this is personal opinion, but I wouldn't suggest less than 7 days in the bush. If you're going, for example, to Cape Town in South Africa and your main focus is going to the city and seeing the sights there, and then you take a day or two for safari, that's fine. But I sure wouldn't want to fly 2 days each way, or two days each direction and spend just a few days there. Okay? I want to just define terminology here. Parks versus conservancies. Parks are larger, they're operated by the government. They're usually a little less expensive to visit, but they're also much busier. So these are the places commonly where you have a lot of cars around a sighting or something. They're just busier places. The conservancies are private areas. Now, I want to stop for a second. There are private areas, for example, in South Africa, that are private, and even in Kenya, that are privately owned that are not conservancies. And they would be similar to this. It might be somebody who had a large ranch and turned it into a safari area, and it's still owned by that family. That's different than the national parks. And the advantage of the conservancy or the private areas is they're much less crowded. The conservancies in particular, I think, were started in Kenya. And the areas are owned by the Maasai tribes, the local tribes. They lease out use of the land to a limited number of safari camps, typically 5 or 6. And they get employed by all of the camps and everything. The camps generally are very ecologically sensitive and concerned about the local people. All their employees are local. The money is flowing to the local people. It's just a really good relationship between them, and the Maasai then have a stake in what's going on. They're generally much less busy. It's rare to see another car when you have a sighting. It's just a more relaxed, more natural kind of an environment. But because of that, they're more expensive. So there's the trade-off that you have there. So let's talk about the different areas. And this is really oversimplifying because all of these countries have multiple locations. But let's start with East Africa. The most famous place in Kenya is the Masai Mara. Most famous place in Tanzania is the Serengeti and the Ngorongoro crater. Serengeti and the Masai Mara are really one ecosystem. They connect, and there's a borderline there, and they change the name when you cross the border. Okay? The most famous thing that's going on there is the Great Migration. And I'll touch on that on my next slide, but it is unbelievable to have these huge open plains where all you can see over the horizon are animals. It's just astonishing to see. You may see, I mean, you can't really see them all, but in the Great Migration, there's probably 1 million wildebeest, about 400,000 zebras, plus miscellaneous others, about 1.5 million animals that are migrating. So seeing these huge herds is just really, really something. And touch on something my wife's here. I made a comment. We slowly drove through the herds. We're not driving, it's a guide driving. I made some comment like, boy, these are stupid animals. And my wife said, yeah, but there's 1.5 million of them. Okay. How dumb can they be? So let me talk for a minute about the Great Migration. What people think of when they hear Great Migration are the famous river crossings. When all the wildebeest jump over a cliff and into the river where there's crocodiles and there's all this stuff going on, and they climb out the other end, and it's this amazing scenario going on. And that's worth seeing, but it's far from the only thing to see. But the Great Migration is an all year long situation. What's happening is the animals are following the good grass. So they're just going to always be moving to the next greener pasture, if you will. And basically the migration goes at the northern end into the Masai Mara in Kenya, the southern end to the southern, just below the Serengeti, to an area called Ndutu. And at that end, you have wildebeest birthing. So you've got all of those animals giving birth. There's something like 100,000 wildebeest that are born within 2 weeks. It's just a phenomenal situation. And that happens around February. The river crossings up at the very top of this map are typically around this time of year, our summertime, which is, remember, it's opposite, so it's their wintertime. But the other end of the migration, basically. But even if you're not there at prime time, and there's reasons not to go at that prime time, there's loads to see, loads going on. This is just one event out of something that happens every single day, something else going on. Rwanda and Uganda, this is predominantly for the gorilla treks that we talked about earlier. Just a quick comment, Rwanda is an incredible place. We went there, and the main city is a place called Kigali, and it is spotless. It is unbelievably clean and safe. I heard from someone else who was a doctor, if I recall, and he had gone over there to be a volunteer doctor. They made him get out every 2 weeks, I think, on Sunday. Everybody goes out and cleans, including him. So it just gives you a sense of what's going on there. I mean, it's quite a lovely city. It's on kind of a mountainous area. The countryside is gorgeous. It's the most beautiful place I've ever been, both of these, Uganda and Rwanda. So it's an interesting place to visit just by itself. So that's an oversimplification for East Africa. Southern Africa, the most popular locations are South Africa and Botswana. South Africa, what is well known is Kruger National Park and a place called Sabi Sands. In Botswana, you have the Okavango Delta, which you were asking about, which happens as the rainwaters come down from Angola, which is north of there, and flood the plains throughout Botswana. And a place called Chobe National Park, which has several 100,000 elephants plus a bunch of other stuff. And, very different experiences in these different areas. Again, all the countries have other places as well, but these are the ones, kind of the famous ones that people might have. In in the Delta or in Okavango area, one of the things you can do is a boat safari, either on a powerboat or on what's called a Mokoro, which is basically a canoe. So that's kind of a different experience than what you would have riding in a vehicle all the time, in a automobile or, in a truck. So little different exposure there. I think the Colette trip is in South Africa.
Yes.
I have not been to the areas that they're talking about, so I can't speak to anything about that. But it sounds like a nice trip regardless. Let me touch on group tour versus private travel. Now, how many of you travel with groups someplace? Quite a few of you. Okay. There are lots of tours. Okay, Colette being one of them. All the big companies offer safaris. All of them. I mean, you mentioned you went with Makedo, I think. There's a bunch of other companies that do it as well. One of the talks I gave, there was a woman who had gone with Overseas Adventure Travel, OAT, but all the big companies offer them. Excuse me. For private travel, there are numerous specialized travel agencies that work only on safaris. So they've been to all these places, they know the areas, they know all about what you're doing. And I would not just use a generic travel agent if you wanted to go to one of these places by yourselves. These specialized travel agents add a lot of value for you. And just a few of them to mention, England was where safari started. Well, I mean, not in England, but the British are the ones who started safaris. And they still have the strongest contingent probably of safari goers and travel agents that work on that. So Expert Africa and Yellow Zebra are large companies this is what they do. We've used Expert Africa. They're very good. In South Africa, there's a company called Africa Geographic. And then there are local Africa companies. One we've used in Tanzania is a company called Good Earth Tours. So lots of companies that can help you. The advantages of the tour is that it's turnkey. You pay your money, you go on the trip, you're done. You don't have to give it a lot of thought beyond that. A lot of you have gone on tours, so I mean, you know more than I do because we traveled independently. But I mean, the group travel, one of the advantages potentially would be social interactions. There's other people that you're with the whole time. And possibility is it could be less expensive or it could be more expensive, just depending on what you're getting. And I'll be talking in a bit about how to evaluate what you're getting. One of the downsides that I've heard from people who go on these is every once in a while you get a stinker or a group of stinkers in the group that just aren't compatible with other people and they create problems. But you're stuck with them because you're in this group tour, whatever the group is. That certainly might apply to the larger group, but on safari, you're enclosed in a vehicle together, might be 4 or 6 or 8 people together in there. And if you've got people that aren't compatible, it can be a problem, okay? Which could happen in any case. But the advantage, I guess, in that, at least you might be able to switch groups around or something. It's a preset itinerary, which is handy, but it also doesn't give you a flexibility of making choices. And one potential downside is one of the questions I'll be discussing is, how many people are in the vehicle with you? You want less instead of more. And if it's let's just call it a lower end tour, they can have up to 8 people in the car, which can really be challenging. And I'll show you why in a bit. Private means you have total flexibility on when you go, where you go, and how you go. Okay? That's good and bad because it makes it more complicated. But the travel agents that I've discussed, those specialized travel agents, have suggested itineraries. So if you go on their website, you'll see, if you want to go to Botswana or whatever, here's 4 or 5 different options that they're starting points for you. And you can book them as is, or you can talk with them and say, well, yeah, I like this, but I don't like that, and they'll give you some other options. So you have total control that way. But they're very helpful. These travel agencies are very helpful. If you want to pay extra, you can even have a private vehicle where it's just you and your spouse or, you and your group or whatever it is that you're dealing with, or just you. And as far as social life goes, I mean, you probably will have people in the vehicle with you that you may or may not like. Okay. If you like them, great. You can socialize. If you don't, it's up to you. But all the camps pretty much have a campfire every night, and people sit around and have a drink and talk about their day. So there is social life available regardless, whichever way you go. I wanted to give you at least a reference point or a starting point for cost. And this is from a magazine, African Safari Magazine. These are their numbers and their suggestions. I'm just copied from them, but it's a good starting point. They broke it down to budget, mid-range, and luxury. Okay, budget safaris, which are $250 to $400 per person per night. These are really simple. You may just be doing basic camping. You may have 6 or 8 people in the vehicle with you. You're in the national parks as opposed to the private areas. If you step up to the mid-range, which is $450 to $800 per person per night, which they say is kind of the best balance that most people find, you get comfortable lodges or well-run tented camps, smaller groups in the game drive vehicle, good guiding, which by the way is a big deal. You really want good guides, and better access to the better areas, more productive wildlife areas. And then if you want to step up from that, the luxury safaris are anywhere from $900 to $1,500 per person per night. And obviously you're getting a more luxurious camp or place to stay. You're in prime locations. You have really experienced guides, small numbers of guests, and very high levels of service. So those are the kind of the 3 ranges that they talk about. One thing that I'm not certain about, but I think is true, is that those numbers do not include any fees for the parks or the conservancies. And that can be $100 or $200 per night per person. So just to be clear, you want to at least make sure it is, whether it is or isn't included. I can't hear you. I'm sorry. Okay, hang on a sec. We've got people on Zoom, so she's going to bring the mic over.
I just said that it's actually written on the bottom.
Yeah, I put it on there,
Oh,
but
okay.
yeah,
That's,
it's okay. I put it on there, but I'm just clarifying that I'm not sure. Okay, but it's a generic starting point. Okay, so whether you're going on a group tour or you're going individually, this kind of gives you a framework as a starting point. And this is kind of a checklist that I would use. Again, whether it's a tour or private. Number 1 question is, where are you going? Are you going to Kenya? Are you going to Botswana? Where are you going? Okay, that's a good starting point. A big issue is, which season are you going? Because things change throughout the seasons, and the difference in cost can be 40 or 50% from prime time to off season. That's a heck of a big difference. So it's certainly worth knowing if you're going at a good season. I'll talk about how to figure that out in a minute. But it also affects what's going on in those places at those times. So for example, in Kenya, prime season is when those river crossings are happening for the migration. In Tanzania, prime season is when the migration is down the other end and all those animals are being born. Okay, so it just depends on that. And what does change a lot is the weather, and whether or not whether it's green or it's brown, because it could be a dry season or a rainy season, whatever. So that really makes a big difference. The next item is, is it budget or mid-range, or, what level you're going on, which also, aside from the accommodation, affects how many people might be in the game together in the vehicle with you, and whether it's a private area or in a national park. One thing that's not touched on there is, how do you get to the different places? As I say, we go to different locations. We go typically to 3 different places. Some of them are close enough we can have a game drive, or basically in the safari vehicle they take us to the next camp. Others we fly. So in Kenya, as an example, which is where we're spending most of our time, in Kenya, going from Nairobi to the Masai Mara is a 5-hour drive. And not all the roads are terrific. So we prefer to fly if we're going that far. In Tanzania, it's pretty typical that between locations that you'd be going to might be only 2-hour drive. And so in Tanzania, a lot of safaris are structured where the company arranges one guide and vehicle for you, and you have a private vehicle then, and they take you throughout your whole trip. They take you from place to place. They do the game drives with you. It's one seamless experience, if you will, but basically they're driving in between. Whereas in many other locations, you're flying in between, and that's incremental cost. So it just depends on what you're doing there. And then one other variable, which isn't really a financial thing so much as whether it's a camp or a lodge. And that's a choice that you have. And I'll talk about that in a bit. So there's a lot there. I covered a lot of ground. These are 2 good websites that you can look at that have all kinds of information about these areas. Expert Africa is a travel company that we've used. Their website, they have all the different countries listed. They'll tell you about the weather. They'll tell you about what you can see, what the different locations are, all kinds of, and of course they're trying to sell you on their services. So they have all different kinds of camps and everything, but it's great information because it really will tell you, gee, do I want to go in November? Or do I want to go in August? Whatever it is. Safari Bookings is a website that's used by a lot of smaller travel companies to advertise their wares. We've never booked through them, but they have very similar information there as well. So if you go on the website, say, well, I don't know, I'm thinking of Kenya, they'll talk about the weather, they'll talk about all the other stuffs as well. So either of these websites is something that's handy to look at. And even if you're considering a tour, as I said, I think that information, the last slide with the different points on it, is what you want to know. You want to know what you're paying for. Are you going at a good season? Are you going to good places? That kind of thing. Okay? So let's talk about a day on safari. What's it like? You typically wake up around 5 in the morning. You have coffee and something to eat small, and then you leave for your morning drive at 5:30 or 6 in the morning. You're going then because that's when the animals are out. In the middle of the day, it's probably hot. Animals are all sleeping. You want to be there when they're there. So you get out early, and then we'll talk about there's an afternoon drive. Typically, there's 2 drives, a morning and an afternoon drive. So the early drive, you're out at about 6. You finish your game drive about 9 or so. It's usually 3-4 hours. And you'll eat breakfast. Now, it may be that you're eating breakfast in the bush, where they stop and they set up a table or something for you and give you food. Or it may be that you go back to your lodging and eat there. You have a break then until about 3 in the afternoon. You can rest. You can do other things. Some of them have other activities that you might be interested in. Some places have swimming pools. It's just whatever you want to do. And then around 3 o'clock, you leave. You go out on another game drive until around maybe 6 or 7. And in most places, they stop someplace that's scenic for what they call a sundowner, which is basically they set up a table with wine or beer or gin and tonics, whatever it is, in a scenic area, and you watch the sun go down. Okay? So it's a nice experience. And then they take you back to your camp or your lodge. You have dinner and you go to bed. So that's the sequence. Early morning game drive, afternoon to evening game drive, eat and sleep. Okay? That's kind of what happens. A typical game drive. You and whoever's in the car with you are driven by a guide who knows the area and knows the wildlife. Now, they all have different personalities. Some are real fun to be with, some are quieter or whatever, but they really do know. They know all the animals, they know the areas. Many of them have grown up in those areas, so it can be really educational, and they're really good at finding animals. I mean, they see things that you'll never see most of the time. There are exceptions where you actually are the one that finds something that they didn't see. We've had that, okay? We had a case where we were looking for some lion cubs, and our guide knew of some lion cubs in an area. We didn't find them there, but my wife and I found 3 cubs in another place. We saw them. Okay, so you keep your eyes open because maybe you can see something they don't, but they are amazing at finding animals. Okay, and one of the things that helps in general is they have a radio and they talk to the other guides, and if there's a sighting, they're talking to each other. They might ask the people in the car, what do you want to see? Probably knowing you want to see cats, but they're going to ask anyway, or they might ask, and then they'll try and accommodate you if they can. One thing to know is the drives can be really bumpy or dusty. Okay, depending on where you are in the season, you can get bounced around a bit. So you need to be prepared for that. On our first safari, we were in South Africa, and that was 15 years ago, something like that. And the people that were in the car with us, the woman was 88, the guy was 94, and they did well. I know we joked about it because, everybody wants to take pictures of the animals. And the joke was that she was so slow with getting the camera up and everything, she always took the backside. Okay, so we would see the back. Oh, look, there's one for you. But anyway, but they did okay. They helped her into the car. I mean, she needed help to get in and out, but it was okay. But just be prepared. It can be dusty, and it certainly oftentimes is bumpy, depending on where you're going. One thing to keep in mind is there's loads of different animals out there. And don't just have tunnel vision and say, I want to see a lion and that's all. Don't stop for anything else or whatever. Just keep an open mind and you'll enjoy it much more. So open or closed vehicles. Closed vehicles like on your left are typically used in places like Tanzania where they drive between the various locations. So you're driving long distances, the roads can be dusty. It's nice being able to close everything up and not have to deal with that. But it also insulates you a little bit from nature, okay? Although they have big windows and everything, so you can certainly see and take pictures. Open vehicles are the opposite of that, and they're typically used when the guides and everything are provided by the camp or the lodge that you're in. Okay, so they're staying in the local area, they're not traveling huge distances, and they're open for a reason because it gives you much more exposure to nature. Okay. This particular one that is in the picture here gives you a sense of how they're set up and why it's better to have fewer rather than more. Typically what happened, and they're all different, but many of them are kind of stair-step like this where you're getting higher and higher towards the back. As you go further to the back, it's a much bumpier ride. It's really hard to hear what the guide is saying if you're in the back. And if there's 3 across on the seats, it's really hard to see. So it's just not as much fun as opposed to being in a much smaller group. So that's a question to ask always. To define terms, camps versus lodges. Camps are tented, but they're not pup tents. It's not like Boy Scouts. Even the basic camps have an ensuite bathroom, they have a shower and a toilet and everything. They have comfortable beds, but they're just pretty basic. Okay, this would be a less expensive kind of a camp. All of them have multiple tents, and the less expensive ones might have, say, 10 tents, something like that. And then they have a common area, which is where you eat, and they may have a seating area that you can read or whatever, okay? Luxury camps, big difference. Much larger tents, much fancier. Generally, as I said, have better guiding and may well be in these private locations that we talked about before. Okay, so there's a big difference between the two, but they're all tented. We like being in camps because we like being exposed to nature. We want to hear the animals at night, hearing a lion roar, whatever it might be, and just being really immersed in nature as opposed to being in a more closed out environment. The camps all have these central areas that I mentioned, and some of them can be fairly substantial like this. Some of them are tented, but they're larger areas, which is where you eat and you have other gatherings, if you will. As I said, we like being in camps because we're open to nature. Well, they're open to nature over there. Okay. They had a visitor for lunch. It was very safe. The guy on the end is a guide. They didn't care. It was a young elephant who was just curious as to what was going on. But if you're in a closed hotel, you're not going to experience that kind of stuff. Okay. Lodges, basically, maybe in an African style, but they're more like a hotel. They're more substantial buildings. They might have air conditioning. They're like what you would find in a hotel here. Oh, by the way, I mean, the camps, generally, the less expensive camps have more tents, meaning more people. And they might, as I said, maybe 10 or 15 tents, something like that. The more expensive ones might have a half a dozen or so. So there's fewer people around, you know, higher level of service, all that kind of stuff. A lodge might have 100 or 2 people in it. So it's a very different kind of an environment than being in a small group in a camp. When you're in safari areas, there's optional things you can do. Okay. One of the things in some areas is you can do a balloon ride. And we were just talking about that a little while ago. In the Serengeti and in the Masai Mara and maybe in other places, one of the activities, an early morning activity you can do instead of a game drive is a balloon ride. And they gather you up, and it's usually early morning, as I said before. You fly very low over the animals, and you're looking down and seeing elephants and everything down there. And then you have a nice breakfast in the group when they land. Just about anywhere you go, you can visit local villages and local schools. It's really worth doing. The schools, you're seeing the little kids who are cute, all of them, and really getting a sense of how they're living, and the contrast between their life and ours is significant. And visiting the villages, you can experience some of their culture. Now, they certainly want to sell you something. In the villages that are open to tourists coming, they always have some kind of a local handicraft that they're making that they want to sell you. It's a way for them to have some money. To the extent you can, please support them. And some of the stuff is really neat. It's nice to have something that's handmade locally. It's pretty inexpensive generally, and it's a nice keepsake. Then there's really interesting things to see besides the animals. Okay, that's Victoria Falls, which is an amazing place. It's one of the 7 wonders of the world. It is quite an experience. It's also a big tourist attraction. They have all kinds of touristy things around it. You can bungee jump. I mean, you can go on a boat down close to the waterfall, all kinds of stuff. One of the things that we did, which was atypical for us, I would say, is we went on what's called a microlight. A microlight is basically like a motorcycle with a propeller in front and a wing on top with a pilot, and then you sit behind the pilot on the motorcycle, and then they take off. Okay, so you're flying on this motorcycle.
On top of the forest.
I'm sorry?
On top.
Yeah, you're up in the sky. And experience, my wife was on the microlight. We flew separately because she was only one tourist on each. And the pilot says, "Oh, that's George Bush's motorcade down there." She went, "Right, sure." P.S. It was. He was there doing some kind of charity work or something. And, you know, Air Force One was there, all that stuff. So you never know. I keep saying, you never know what you'll see in safari. But it was a neat experience. And on that particular thing, they have cameras on the wings. And so they take a picture of you over the falls and stuff like that. It's touristy, but it's a pretty neat experience. Africa has wonderful sunrises and sunsets. It's really spectacular. I mean, it is just beautiful. And the skies, even at night, are spectacular. You have the southern stars. You don't have a lot of cities around, so you don't have the light pollution. It's really quite something to see. And if you drive between locations, you have an opportunity to see the local towns, see how these people live. It really is neat. And by the way, these guys here, they're taxis. Okay? That's how they make it their living. But, you know, busy place, just a little town. So let me give you some tips And anybody who wants to share others, please feel free. And then we're going to have some time just to ask questions or whatever. You really want to wear comfortable clothes because you're in the bush and nobody gives a damn. Okay. And you want to be comfortable. I mean, you don't need fancy clothes or anything. Just be comfortable. If you're flying between locations, some of those are smaller planes and they'll charge you extra, or they refuse to take big, heavy luggage. So that's one reason to do that. All the places that you stay will do laundry. So there's no need to have a bunch of stuff with you. They'll wash it for you and give it to you the next day or two, whenever it is. Just one tangent on that is most of these places are drying on a line outside. They don't have a dryer. So depending on the weather, if it's raining, it's not going to get very dry. Okay. So my suggestion is that you bring clothes that are light in weight that would dry faster. Okay. But that's not a requirement, just a suggestion. But don't overpack. I mean, we typically go with like 2 shirts, 2 pants, some underwear and socks, and a few incidentals, and that's about it. One little carry-on, even for 2 weeks, because they'll wash it for you, to keep it up for you. And it's a lot easier to travel that way anyway. Food is always great. We've never had a bad meal, and we've stayed at lesser places and better places and whatever. Food is always wonderful. It's plentiful, it's delicious, and if you have any allergies or anything, just tell them. They'll accommodate you. Maybe less of an issue with this group, but a lot of people go there and spend their time on the phone. They're watching YouTube videos or something, I don't know what. Don't do that. You just took a big trip to go there, enjoy nature, put the phone away, okay? And I get asked questions about taking pictures. Some people say, should I buy a camera? How should I do this? This is really up to you, obviously. A lot of people just use their phones, and they love their pictures. The limitation to a phone is it doesn't have a big zoom. And, you're not always just right next to the animal. So the animal may be smaller in the picture or whatever. That's a trade-off you have. If you choose to get a camera of some kind, get something with some zoom, whatever it is. And if you have questions, we can do that offline. A big tip is don't learn how to use whatever it is you're going to use while you're on safari. Okay? Virtual certainty that while you're fiddling with it, something great will happen in front of you. Okay? It's just Murphy's Law. So be comfortable with your phone or your camera, whatever it is, so that you can take advantage of those situations. My wife's suggestion, which I think is great, keep a simple diary, because you will forget some of the stuff that you're seeing and doing, okay? If you need a bathroom break when you're on a game drive, the guide will stop at a safe place, and you go behind the vehicle and do your business, okay? They expect it. It's common. Everybody does it. It's not a problem. And just a thought, to the extent you're interested, read up on animal behaviors, even though the guides will tell you. If you ask questions, they'll tell you. But reading up on it a little bit, it just helps you to appreciate what you're seeing. And really don't forget the people. Everybody we've ever met on safari has been great. People are wonderful. They have their own cultures and their own backgrounds, and hearing about their lives and engaging with them is really a lot of value. It's just like if you go anywhere else. But their lives are more different than, say, if you go to France, okay? And hearing about it, learning about it, hearing what's happening with them is really pretty interesting. I mentioned buy some souvenirs made by the locals. We always do. My wife always does. Visit a local village or school. And just like with anything, learn a little bit of their language, how to say hello or thank you, things like that. And bear in mind that every location is different. They'll have different languages. Now, they all speak English too. Particularly if you're on safari, they're all used to dealing with people who speak English because it's kind of the universal language. Many of them, by the way, were colonies of England, so the English is taught in schools and everything. But it's just nice for them to hear you say thank you or whatever in their language. Okay? Okay, so let's throw it open. What questions do you have? Let me start with that. And Ilona will come over with the mic so we can engage everybody. Hang on just a bit here. Wow. Okay, she's going to run around with the mic.
Thanks. Hi. I sleep with an electric device.
A CPAP or something?
A CPAP, yeah. I can get the converter for the power and I can get for the plugins.
Yes.
But do these places have accessible, plentiful outlets and power turned on all night?
Yes, generally, but you need to ask that question. Yeah, but most of them do.
I have a question about safety,
Mhm.
because I know that Kenya and Nairobi especially, I just had friends who were attacked. There was a terrorist attack in Kenya, and there are in some other African countries. So that's something. What does the organization are doing about this particular problem, which is a problem?
Mhm. Okay. Most of our safaris have been to Kenya. So let me speak specifically about that. There are certainly parts of Nairobi that I would never go to. We don't spend a lot of time in Nairobi, in the city. You know, we arrive at the airport, we go to a local hotel, and they're all safe. They have guard gates and everything. They're set up for that. And by the way, in Kenya specifically, there are like 3 layers of security checks before you get on a plane. I mean, they're very cautious about it. We've never seen or heard of any problems. I don't know any of the particulars that happened to your friends, but it's very unusual. The same thing applies really to all the countries. Particularly since one of their major industries is tourism, they want to keep us safe. So that doesn't mean that bad people won't do something, but bad people might do something here. So I don't know. But we've always been safe. You know, we don't spend time in the rough areas. There'd be no reason to anyway, but we certainly don't do it. And being out in the bush, it's always been great. And this, again, it depends on whoever's helping you to set up your trip, whether it's a tour or a private. They know the areas to keep you safe. So, I appreciate the concern. Maybe offline I'd ask you some more details about what happened to your friends, but it's not a typical thing at all. Other questions?
Give a few different questions, but first, what size zoom lens do you use for your camera, typically?
Because I'm into it, okay, I typically go with 2 cameras. One of them is a 70 to 200 zoom. The other one is a 500 prime. Okay, so maximum length is maybe 400 or 500 millimeters.
Do you use that one quite a bit versus the 200, or would 200 be okay? No.
200, depending on where you go. You know, there are some areas where you're not going to get that close to the animals, in which case you need a longer zoom. There are other places where the lion's right next to you. So it just depends on where you are. But I would say in general, you should have the ability to go out to maybe 400 or so most of the time.
Okay, next question is, do you recommend getting rabies vaccine before heading to Africa?
I have not done it. As far as I know, it's not recommended in any of the countries, but I would check with the CDC website and they'll tell you. When I've looked at it before for, as I say, most of our travel's been with Kenya. They mention it if you're going to be working with animals or, dealing with the animals on an ongoing basis, you might want to have a rabies shot, but otherwise there's no reason.
So you never come that close?
Well, we're close to animals, but we're not petting them. With one exception there. It's not typical that you're doing that.
Okay, and finally, mosquitoes. Are there lots of mosquitoes out there?
Again, depends on when and where. If you're there in a wet place and it's hot and muggy, you're probably going to have more mosquitoes. All of the places, all of the lodges or camps or whatever will provide a spray, mosquito spray, and they also have nets around the beds if they're in an area that would be prone to that.
Is there something that you recommend or that you use that is highly effective?
We don't. I mean, we do take malaria pills when we go, which is something that, and again, we've never had any exposure to malaria. We've never even shut my mouth maybe, but we've never ever had a mosquito bite there. But just to be safe, we take malaria pills. But the answer to your question, no. I mean, if you need spray, it's all of the camps and everything have them, and they're happy to have you use it. Sure. And if you want to talk camera later, I'll be happy to. Okay.
Crystal, thank you for sharing your wonderful photographs.
Absolutely. Can you speak up a little? I'm sorry.
Thank you for sharing your wonderful photographs.
Thank you.
With us. They were very nice to see. But that brought up another question in my mind. That the animals looked very close in the pictures, but how far away were they? Much of the time.
It depends. Okay. I mean, some are very close. I mean, I had some pictures there where the lions were right next to the vehicle, but most of the time they're further away. Okay. They might be to that back wall or further, who knows? It just depends on the situation. So there's a big variation in that, but most of the time they're not right on top of you.
Okay, you say that you always go to Kenya. I'm curious if you want to take a trip and to pick the one that you're going on to see the most diverse type of animals, which one would you pick?
Oh boy. I had kind of a similar question earlier. In any of these places, there's a wide variety of animals. I mean, they have some variations from southern to eastern or whatever, but they all have lions. Almost all of them have cheetahs and leopards. They all have, well, almost all of them have all the species. Let me just put it that way, the ones that you would think of typically. There are differences, but it's at the margins. The main ones that people are looking for generally are in all of the locations. And by the way, the websites that I mentioned, Expert Africa's has a list of what animals have been cited by their guests. So you can see what was what. You have a follow-up here.
So why is it that you always pick Kenya?
Well, we've gotten to the point where we know some of the animals. A lot of them are named, and we've seen them grow up, and we've seen their kids grow up and whatever. So that's kind of interesting. We have guides that we've gone out with numbers of times and we like. To some degree, it's inertia. I know what I want to do. I know where I want to go. It's easier than going through and figuring it out. Excuse me. Yeah, so anyway, that's why we do like Kenya a lot. But we've had great safaris in Tanzania. We've been to Botswana. I mean, all of these places, you can have a really good time. Okay.
When you're dealing with questions about immunizations and you're dealing with the present day CDC and the Department of Health and Human Services, which is notoriously right now anti-immunization, are there, in the locations that you're going, are there recommendations from, say, the Kenyan government or the Botswana government?
Yeah, they all have it.
That you can access?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I would think.
You just have to go looking for them?
Yeah, I mean, if you go to their government website, I would say, do a search, suggested shots for Botswana or whatever, okay? And I'm sure you'll find it. And by the way, from my experience, even today, if you look at the CDC, they've got their list there. It's still covered.
Your tour
You
guides
do whatever
would
you want,
probably
but I've seen that.
Your tour guides would probably help you too.
Yeah, and certainly whoever you're booking through would tell you as well. By the way, a lot of these countries, just like I guess Europe now pretty much, all have visa requirements. And so wherever you're going, your tour guide or your travel company probably will tell you this. Most of them are online and pretty easy, but some of them are still manual. So you just need a little time ahead of time. Okay. Yes, one over here.
I was in Africa for a month, and we took a lot of little tours, and I was very impressed with the guides because they are very well trained
Yeah.
and very safe, and they really watch out for you.
Mm-hmm.
Saved my life.
Wonderful. I mean, literally saved your life or
Yeah.
just kept you safe?
Yeah. I almost drowned in the Zambezi River.
Oh my gosh. Oh boy. I don't know what the story was there, but okay.
Yeah, yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
Wow.
Also, that we were going down the Zambezi and they had a landslide. I mean, that's 300 feet up. And it sounded like an explosion and down come the side of the,
Wow.
yeah. Oh, we paddled real fast.
I bet. That would get you motivated. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
But I agree with you on the guide. So yeah.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
they have a lot of training.
Yeah. Yeah.
makes
I mean,
you
it does
feel
vary.
good.
It does
Yes.
vary. I mean, we have had, what did we figure out? Like 40 or 50 different guides over the years. And we've had one or two that were kind of stinkers, but most of them are great. So yeah, it's good. And it's amazing that you got to spend a month there. One behind you.
So speaking of guides, I'm assuming you give them some sort of tip or something like that. Local currency, U.S. currency, what kind of tips?
I mean, they take money in any form.
Okay,
They've always been happy to get US dollars.
okay,
I've never asked them if they wanted it in local currency because I didn't want to bother. Most of the places where you would go will take credit cards, by the way, for
Okay.
purchasing or whatever, for incrementals. But not all,
including
but
in the
most of them.
camps and that type of thing?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, again, if they're tourist oriented, they want money.
Okay,
And one way to get money is to have credit card availability. So most of them do. Not
Okay.
all, but most
Thank you.
probably do. But yes, for tips, I mean, US dollars work fine. Other questions? Any other experiences you want to share? I mean, we had one there, it was pretty wild. Other experiences from when you've traveled? Any other questions?
I'll just mention, I have not been to Africa, but I've been to Australia.
Okay, speak up
And-
just a little, please.
And your comment about getting up in the morning and going all day, we did a eco resort that kind of takes you places and to see the scenery more than
Mhm.
animals, but animals as well, and animal sanctuary. It can be a really long day.
Mm,
My husband and I are both in good shape, but we were kind of like, oh my God, we got to get up at 5 and then we got to go for 4 hours. And then we got, it was a lot.
Yeah.
So I don't know, just for people to be prepared for that. I imagine
Mhm.
Africa is very, very similar.
Yeah.
And some folks are more energetic. I also like my downtime. So,
Yeah.
and then, it just can be a really long day. So I don't know if on these they have options for people to stay behind one day, because you're talking
Sure.
about like 10 days of doing
Yeah.
this, right?
Yeah. I mean, certainly you're the boss.
Yeah.
I mean, you can certainly choose not to go. It's up to you. And the camps will accommodate, or the lodge or whatever will accommodate you. Totally up to you. Okay. But you're right. I mean, it can be tiring. I mean, we always get up early anyway. So for us, it wasn't that big of a deal, but, but
late when you get dinner, though.
yeah, true. I mean, you're getting dinner at maybe 7 or 8 o'clock. And I mean, so it can be a long day. Yeah. I mean, by the way, some of the places allow you to do a full day safari. Okay. So you could go out and not come back until the evening or whatever. And, you may see more or whatever, but that's not typical. They may offer you the option, but it's not the common thing is the morning and afternoon one. So just so you know. Okay. But thank you for the comments. Anything else? Good, bad, or indifferent? Okay.
Thanks, Bob. We really appreciate it.
Thank you very much for everybody.